If you see it saying it's live on your end, let me know because right now I'm still scheduling.
I see a red live thing up in the left-hand corner of my window.
So that means we are actually live.
Okay, good. Hey, everybody.
Yeah, I always love it when like the guest knows that we're live before I do, and I'm
Right.
still there sitting here waiting for it to say, "Yeah, we're live." But we are live.
Okay.
It's
Well, I
it's
don't want that dead silence. It's bad.
no, we don't want the dead silence. It's another week here with the BBC, not the British guys. It's the Brent Broadcasting
Right.
Channel,
Much better.
and yeah, I think so. But anyway, I'm here with my buddy Ron Miller, who is the enterprise reporter for TechCrunch. Ron, it's always a pleasure.
Well, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to be here.
And so I'm going to get the sports talk out of the way
All
first.
right. Well, it
We
was
got to do this.
obligatory.
It's the obligatory sports talk. But I think we actually have a little bit more in common this past football season than we've had previously because the guy that used to do all that stuff for you guys in the Patriots, he
Right.
moved down south, and from when I remember, you didn't like transfer your loyalty down to Tampa Bay once that
I did not. No, I was a fan scorned. I was bitter.
happened. So how was it watching the guy win the Super Bowl for another team?
It wasn't pleasurable for me. I'll be honest. But I mean, the guy's amazing. You gotta just give him credit. He's playing at a high level in his 40s, and the way he was able to kind of take control of that team after they were looked pretty shaky there for the first 6 or 8 weeks, and they came alive when they needed to. They beat Green Bay, they beat New Orleans, they beat Kansas City. They beat really good teams. So give
Yeah,
him credit, tip your hat, and the guy's a champion. That's what he does.
that's what he does, folks.
Mhm.
That's what he does. All right, so we got
I
that
hope he
out of
doesn't
the
do it
way.
again, though.
Well, you and me are both on the same page for that one. Me because I'm a Rams fan and we are
Right.
in the NFC, and it would be nice to see us beat him once,
Yeah.
in my lifetime. But
I would, I would like to see that. Maybe Aaron Donald put him on his back.
oh, I would love to see that. Oh my god! All right, now my dreams aside. All right,
All right.
there's a lot of stuff
Fantasy
going on.
football.
That's right. There's a lot of stuff going on in the enterprise space, man,
There
and of
sure is.
course you're writing nonstop about what's going on. So why don't we just kind of tick through some of the things that you've been writing on that's caught your attention and kind of mine too. And let's talk about like the changing of the guard
Yeah.
at two of the biggest technology companies around with two iconic. Well, one has been announced. One we're kind of speculating on. I should say it
Right.
like that. It
Yeah.
hasn't been official yet. But earlier this year, Mark Benioff, no, excuse me, Jeff Bezos
I keep
announced that
mixing it
he's.
up too.
I thought I was going to make it. Jeff Bezos announced that he's going to be stepping down as CEO of Amazon and replace. He's basically moving the next guy up with Andy Jassy going from head of AWS to taking over for Jeff Bezos. So, what are your initial thoughts on that? Do you see that as being a huge changes ahead for Amazon, or is it more like just keeping it going in the same direction?
I mean, that's what it looks like. I mean, Andy Jassy is cut from the same cloth as Bezos. He's part of his, inner circle. He was the guy who, along with Jassy and, whoever the executives were at that point in 2004 or five, when they came up with this idea for web services. He was there at the beginning, and so was Adam Silipsky, to be honest. I mean, that's why maybe it isn't surprising that he became, but I'm getting ahead of myself here. But
You're foreshadowing here, man.
yeah, but when you think about Jassy, he's so smart, and he like has all this knowledge in his head, and he can speak so well extemporaneously about just about every product in the portfolio, and there's hundreds of products in the portfolio, and he can talk about each one of them in depth and intelligently. And he's going to go and move into to the larger seat and have to take care of the larger company. And so obviously when we heard that, for people like me who follow AWS closely, it was like, well, what happens to AWS? It's like this this domino effect. Bezos goes into the executive chairman role, Jassy goes into the Amazon CEO role, and then who takes over for Jassy. And it's not a small matter. Obviously Amazon's a huge company, but AWS is like a company unto itself, and like a very, very successful company. It's on a $51 billion run rate. It's kind of easy to get lost in a number that large and think, like, not see it for as big as it is.
Right.
But I mean, like, that's just a substantial company on its own, and it's part of another company. So I guess when I heard about it, I immediately wrote something, obviously, about what could happen next. And I looked at and I thought about, and I talked to people like you and some other people in the industry, and I think the general consensus was that they were going to go internal. They were going to get somebody like Peter DeSantis or Matt Garman, and I didn't even remember, to be honest, that Zalipsky was his lieutenant, because it was like 5 years ago, and but
it's not like he went away and did nothing.
No. So
Tableau.
Right. So he did something fantastic. Actually, he leaves AWS. He goes to Tableau. He changes them, transforms them from an on-prem, software company into a SaaS company. Brings that up to the point where Salesforce buys them for $15.7 billion. I mean, so that's another.
I just round up, man. 16 billion. That's
say why not?
Yeah. So yeah. Then he comes over and spends a couple of years with Salesforce, and kind of swinging it over to Salesforce now. Salesforce has bought huge companies, made big acquisitions, brought in a lot of executive talent at the top tier. I mean, not only the 16 billion or 50.7 to be exact for Tableau, but the most recent one hasn't officially closed yet, but 27 billion for Slack. Right. And then you have others that came in before that. So we know, we know what's going on with Amazon. The speculation is, starting to bubble up a little bit about Salesforce and about Benioff. I mean, Benioff is like a larger than life person. He's been running the company since the very beginning. He has outside interests. Maybe this is a time for him to do a Bezos and step aside. And who's next?
Right. Well, I mean, I wrote an article at the end of 2020 about Salesforce's deep bench of executive talent, because it occurred to me as they bought, Slack, that now they have Stuart Butterfield and they have Zalipsky and they have the guy who runs MuleSoft, and of course they have Brett who came over in the Quip deal.
Quip, right?
Yeah.
Quip.
So I mean, there's a lot of, and there's other people, and there's a bunch of people internally who are also highly qualified, but when you looked at it, Zalipsky and a couple of other people, especially Brett Taylor, looked like the best things. But just to sort of back up to your question a little bit, Benioff has been at this job for 20 years, and my speculation in that post was, will he, and this was even prior to Bezos. It was sort of more thinking, this guy. He's built a company. It's over $20 billion now. He's done so much in his career. Like, what does he have left to prove? But what does Tom Brady have left to prove? And still going out there.
I'd have to bring him back, man.
Sorry, but it's like successful people. and will Benioff step back into the executive chairman role? And I think it was like a month after we wrote that, Reuters had a report that they were hearing from sources that Benioff was thinking about doing just that, sooner than I thought. I was thinking like at some point, maybe this year, maybe next year, something like that. But maybe in the next few months, Reuters was speculating. And so that sort of brought us back. And that Taylor was the heir apparent. And when we had this discussion at the end of last year, because I did talk to you too, because obviously Salesforce pretty well. You're like the Tom Brady of Salesforce.
Oh my God. You're killing me now.
So Taylor was like the number one guy. He makes the most sense. He's been given more and more responsibility. And, if Benioff did want to step back, if you look at where he came from, Oracle, and you look at Larry Ellison stepped into the executive chairman role in 2014. He's still heavily involved in the company. So the question is, which model would Benioff take if he stepped back? Would he do the kind of Bezos, Ellison, where he steps back, kind of looks at some of his other business interests and, like spending some time on his island, or does he do more what Bill Gates did, which is, clean cut and go and run a foundation? And given, that Benioff and all of his charitable work and he and his wife have done, the hospital and the daycare center and the whole way that Salesforce is structured to encourage, responsible capitalism is what I call it. That maybe he would want to look more into that. But, if I were a betting man, I would say probably I could see him doing more of the Bezos role, because I just can't see him completely giving up Salesforce, but maybe wanting to get a day away from the day-to-day pressure of running an organization.
First of all, howdy, Chris. Howdy. I haven't heard that much, but I like that. Howdy. Thank you. You know what? I hadn't thought about, the Bill Gates path is, cut and go bigger, even bigger than Microsoft was huge, but he actually went to, big world problems like wiping out malaria and of course, all that's going on now with the pandemic. So if you had to guess because I could see Bezos going that way too, because he's kind of got the big, thing, or I could see him doing like, the executive chair. Which way if you had to speculate, if you had to guess, which way do you think he'd go?
Well, we haven't heard about what, Bezos is going to do, but the word is that he wants to look into his, his rocket business a little bit more. I don't see Bezos, giving up a lot of control of the company. I think he's, again, stepping away from that kind of day-to-day pressure of, running the company, but still having a big hand in it, and letting Jassy, have control of those kinds of day-to-day tasks. But big picture, I think he's going to be involved. Benioff, I think that he could go either way, but I kind of think that he'll probably stick around and continue to run Salesforce on some level and have his hand in that. It just seems like he's too engaged in it, but we'll see. Like I said, he does have that huge charitable arm. He does have that. He's written a lot of books. He's as people say, a larger than life figure, and there are other things he could be doing, but whether he does that or not, I guess we'll see.
You know what I would say? I think he's been, when I think about all like the really big name CEOs, I think he's probably done I was going to say best job, but I don't even think it's a job. I think it's just him of incorporating his personal life and kind of things that he lives by into, what Salesforce is like. He's incorporated philanthropy into kind of the foundation of the company, and he's done it on his own, on his own personal side as well. But then he's also like he incorporates even the kind of the pop life figures. Like, he hangs out with guys like Neil Young and Will.i.am and, MC Hammer. Bone. Yeah. But it's all, so he's able to incorporate who he is really significantly into the fiber of what the company is, better than I think I've seen anybody do, actually.
Yeah.
I think about it. Anyway, so that's a TBD. We'll have to figure that one out. All right. What's not a TBD is one that's, we're all kind of talking about now is Clubhouse and an impact it's having on like really beyond just its own, social audio or drop-in audio, whatever you want to call it. Now you're starting to see it's almost like the Empire Strikes Back, because you're seeing all the platforms, Twitter and Facebook talk about. LinkedIn just said that you're starting to integrate the stuff in because of the kind of the rapid success that Clubhouse has had. So how do you see this playing out Do you see Clubhouse being a standalone and making it and being successful with focusing on the social audio stuff, or do you see the empires integrating that functionality and keeping Clubhouse from being joining them amongst the ranks of the big guys?
I mean, it's really hard to say. Clubhouse obviously has. I looked it up the other day because I was trying to figure out who came first. Like Twitter Spaces or Clubhouse. Um, and it was April 2020 that Clubhouse launched. So they came out of nowhere. It's just a year now, and they're obviously doing very well. They attracted a lot of investment. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but a lot of the Silicon Valley investment community came in behind it, and it got a lot of popularity very quickly. Now, part of that is, in fact, probably due to the pandemic. We don't have a lot of life outside of our houses, so right now, and so that is giving people a place to go and have this conversation, and it's attracting some really major people. And we can talk about the Stuart Butterfield interview in a minute.
Oh,
But
yeah.
The fact is, it's a super interesting place right now. There's a lot happening. There's obviously probably a lot of garbage in there too, like any social network. But um, it has obviously attracted a lot of attention, and people are going there. The question is, it's not. Is it sustainable? Because, as you say, Twitter has something. LinkedIn has just announced something. The Slack is working on something is in beta with something similar. So, it's pretty easy to reproduce. So then the question becomes, how do you become a standalone profitable company on something like that? And it's not really clear to me how that will happen. But I mean, I've seen other things that I wasn't clear about how they would become profitable, and they have. So is it possible that Clubhouse will continue to be successful because of the a bunch of quality people who have been attracted to the platform, or will it be that it it kind of has its moment and then ebbs? That remains to be seen. I say that a lot, but that's true.
Well, that's what you're there for. You're looking out for all this stuff.
Yeah,
I think you're right. I think I think it becomes more difficult as bigger players integrate that in. But I think from what, and I haven't been on Clubhouse a lot, but from what I've kind of gathered is that it's not just the functionality; it's the kind of the culture and the kind of the community that they're building, and that if it's a unique kind of community and culture that it's like a out of worldly kind of thing that allows people that go beyond the technology to just want to stay with that community, then they have something. I don't know if that's what it is right now, or maybe they're building towards that, but I think it has to be something that really separates them from just being able to do social audio in order for them to really have long-term kind of sticking power. I would also think, Spotify just announced something. That's kind of an interesting one because they have that kind of, the
yeah, they
music
have the
community.
platform, right?
Yeah, and if they're adding it, that might be a little bit more of a competitor to Clubhouse than maybe people think. I don't know. I'm going to say like you, it's to be determined. To be seen. But we're all kind of fixated on that. Something that the enterprise is fixated on is RPA. I mean,
Right.
you can't go anywhere without people talking about it, discussing it. You just wrote about Uipath, with what they did recently. Talk a little bit about what you're seeing and why RPA is really making headlines or making huge increases into the enterprise stack at this point.
It's amazing what's happened with this technology, which I've been writing about it a lot lately, and it's sort of you can't sort of talk about RPA without talking about workflow automation, and of which it's a part, and what's called intelligent process automation, of
Right.
which it's also a part. And I was writing about I'm working on an article now on the market as a whole, and one of the things that I learned from IDC is that it's like a subcategory of a subcategory, but they're still looking at it because it's significant. And so if you look at Uipath, which is one of the larger standalone RPA vendors, they filed their S1 to go public last week, and that's while they were private, they raised $2 billion, and they had their last valuation was $35 billion, which is pretty astonishing for a startup that does a pretty niche thing. But so the audience out there might not know what RPA is, so I'll go into that a little bit. So it's called Robotic Process Automation, RPA for short. And really, the value proposition here is the way I kind of describe it is it's almost like an old macro recorder, except it's a little bit more sophisticated than that. So it looks at a process like, say, moving an insurance claim through a process where, a clerk would have to take a number out of a, form and enter it into a spreadsheet. And then, that gets pushed down the line to somebody else. And, eventually an invoice gets generated and it gets printed, and an envelope gets to be put in an envelope, and postage has to be put on there, and it gets sent to somebody. And accounting has to be told it happened, right? So they're aware that this invoice got generated. So if you think about automating that workflow, but in a legacy environment, because a lot of these companies have legacy technology, so they're really not ready to to use more modern workflow tools. It's like ServiceNow is doing a lot more of that. They bought an RPA company last week. They have all these no-code workflow tools that they announced earlier this year. So if you're not able to go there yet, RPA sort of gives you an in into that automation game in a legacy environment. And I mean, they're starting to incorporate more hybrid stuff into it. But that's the value prop, is that you can kind of continue to work with the systems that you have in place, and begin to move things in an automated fashion through a workflow. And so it's done pretty well. The top three companies are Uipath, which, as I said, is going public, Automation Anywhere, and Blue Prism, which went public in 2016. Then you have all these other vendors out there who are trying to get in on the game now, which includes the aforementioned ServiceNow. IBM bought an RPA company. SAP developed an RPA company and then bought Signavio, a Berlin startup, for $1.2 billion at the end of last year. And then you have Microsoft bought one, and then you have like these other vendors like like Abby and Kofax, which are the old kind of scanning workflow vendors, who are also getting into it a little bit, and working with plugins with these other vendors. So there's a lot happening. It's obviously getting a lot of attention, and this workflow automation isn't going away. And I think that what's going to happen is that RPA will sort of get more folded in to this larger market over time, and we'll start to see RPA deprecate a little bit. But right now it's super hot.
I was just thinking, it's been about 10 years since Pega bought Cordiant, and I know that was kind of, they went into robotics earlier than most of these big platforms.
And they just bought another company though last summer, as a matter of fact. So they're in it. They're a more modern representation of it. So what you're seeing is these companies like IBM bought a Brazilian company I hadn't heard of. The one ServiceNow bought was based in India. So, you have these companies. There's a lot of smaller companies out there, that we haven't heard of, and other startups that I have written about. So there's still a lot of action in that market, but I think you'll start to see, things consolidate a little bit over the next couple of years.
And it seems like, everybody's RPA hungry, but isn't it more, that doesn't equate to the intelligent process automation that you spoke about. Are companies thinking they're getting that when they're focusing on the RPA?
I mean, they may, because it's robotic, which I think is a bit of a misnomer, but it's like a bot, exactly, Alan. Alan Berkson wrote that we need another term, and I think he's right. So it's kind of a misnomer, and at least it has been, because it's starting to mix in some real AI. But no, for the most part, it's not artificial intelligence in the way we think about it. Um, and I think that a lot of these things, like what ServiceNow is doing and what SAP wants to do, is to kind of look at this and say, how do we bring intelligence into this process to, you know, to bring even more automation of the enterprise. And one thing I want to bring up here, because I think it's kind of the elephant in the room, is is this a job killer? And it's a debate. Is it a job killer? When you look at RPA, it's like some of the most mundane tasks you're ever going to come across. Like, can you imagine sitting there with a piece of paper, looking for a number, entering it in a spreadsheet? I mean, it's really sucky work, right? But it's work, and there are people doing it, and they're getting paid to do it. So, how much of this is about job elimination, and how much of it is it about like raising the bar and saying, okay, these people that we have doing, these incredibly mind-numbing tasks, can we put them to work doing something else, or are we eliminating those jobs and then making these corporations wealthier through technology? And that's something, again, we won't know until we see it play out. But I think there's a little element of both there.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's mostly about uh, creating having a flexible platform to be able to go where the business needs to go based on unforeseen circumstances. You have to think this pandemic has had a tremendous impact on that line of thinking because things changed overnight. I mean, people couldn't
Absolutely.
shop, and so you had to create a whole new way of getting people the stuff that they need to to do what they need to do. And you had to create like a more direct to consumer. You had to build out your capabilities for going directly to them with offerings and things of that nature. So your whole digital transformation actually, the project or the definition, it for some companies had to change overnight because they were dependent on doing it the way that they'd always had been doing it, and then they couldn't.
Right. I mean, that's a really good point, because everybody I talk to talks about how, for the last 10 months, has talked about how the pandemic has really pushed digital transformation. And digital transformation, in a way, was kind of a nebulous term prior to the pandemic. It was like, oh, we need to digitally transform. I've been hearing it since like 2013, right? Like, you have to be a digital company. But what does that even mean? Well, we're beginning to see what it really means. And it means, a lot of things being pushed to the cloud. It means, as you said, a lot of activity being pushed online in terms of commerce. And it means, like a lot of companies trying to find ways to do things in a digital fashion that maybe weren't ready to do that yet, but were pretty forced to do it by the forcing action that was the pandemic to get there faster. So we've seen this. I mean, I've heard like, Aaron Levy talk about, like, we had like 5 years of digital transformation pushed into 6 months. And I don't think that's hyperbole, really. I mean, we've seen so many companies have to do that. And RPA is like one of those technologies that, having that, when you can't have people, sitting next to each other and going to the company next to them and saying, you know, what's going on with this piece of paper here? And, have you done your part yet? And, this is sort of this communication that's going back and forth in a human workflow. Well, you're going to need those digital elements, even with humans in the loop, to you know, to really make things work when you're in the situation we're in now. And even when we go back to the office, I think we're going to be, from what I'm hearing, to a large extent, from the companies I talk to, because I ask everybody about it, that either they're going to remain remote companies or they're going to be hybrid companies. Very few companies are going to make their employees go back full time. So these kinds of tools that our companies have started to learn how to use, and really been forced to use at a much higher scale than they might have. Um, those are not going away, and technologies like RPA and intelligent process automation are going to help push all that a little bit faster.
Another technology that doesn't seem to be going away because we're still going to, a significant number of people are going to be working from home even after the pandemic is Zoom.
Nope.
And one of the things that was announced last week that you wrote about was Salesforce creating a kind of a Zoom layer that allows them to have Zoom meetings in the context of, in this instance, a sales process or the sales organization. And I thought that was a really significant move because it allows companies to capture the conversation in a way that maybe they wouldn't have been able to get it, after the fact. Once the meeting is over, people scurry their directions and maybe they go back to their CRM application and put notes in. This is a way that they don't have to really do that, and it gets the complete interaction, it gets the complete context, and it allows the AI to kind of run with it and feed them the next best action. But why don't you talk a little bit about why you wrote about it?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, you know, the way Salesforce described it to me was this is taking the digital channel that we were just discussing about, that everybody's moving digital, and it's kind of taking into consideration I'm online, and I should have digital tools that kind of help me as I'm online. Now, in a regular sales process, either I'm on the phone and like I have my notes, or I'm in a meeting and maybe I reviewed my notes in the car before I went in, and then I'm on my own. I'm winging it as I talk to the salesperson. What Salesforce is doing is a couple of things. One is kind of capturing data, which is what you were just alluding to, and then next best actions based on the audio transcript, like kind of pulling stuff out that's clearly an action. And so somebody doesn't have to take notes, like you said, or compile it, or manually put information into the CRM afterwards about, this is a good prospect, this is not a good prospect, whatever, however you do that. But the other part of it, which I thought was super interesting as well, because there are tools that have already started doing what we were just talking about. What is a little bit new, I think, is this idea of having this digital overlay over our screen, which tells me, okay, like Brent Leary is the founder of CRM Essentials, and giving me this like data about you, and
That's cool. Yeah.
stuff that if I'm walking into a meeting cold and I'm trying to sound intelligent as I sell, it's nice to have some data. It also has something else which is pretty interesting, is it has this like kind of graph at the bottom of the screen, and it's like showing, are you talking too fast, are you using clear language, are you interrupting, these kinds of things that are you being a good online citizen as you chat, a good doobie. And from that perspective, it's pretty interesting. I thought when it was described to me, and when I saw the screenshot, I'll be honest, I was surprised because it looked a little busy to me, and I don't think that it's bad. And one of the things that Salesforce said is that you can sort of tune it up or down as much information as you want. You can sort of say, I don't want to see this and I want to see this. So I want to see information about the person presented, but I don't want to see, my score of how fast I'm talking or something like that, because that's just too much information. And the interesting thing is here that, a guy I work with at TechCrunch, my boss's boss actually, tweeted at me after I posted on that, and he said, I don't like this. And I said, why? Is it too busy? And he said, exactly. He said, I want to be engaged with the person I'm selling to. And, if I'm looking at all this stuff, I'm like, my attention is being taken away from the customer. And I think there's something to be said there for. We have to find the right balance here, because, and it depends on the salesperson. Some people are, like Andy Jassy's, they have all the information in their head. And some people just like, they need the piece of paper in front of them. This is Ron Miller. He writes for TechCrunch, and, it depends on what your needs are. And it's going to be hard to find that balance. But I think this is Salesforce, being Salesforce and recognizing there is a way to make this a better experience for the salesperson. And it's a matter of finding that balance and the interface that is optimal. And I think they'll get it over time.
Yeah, I really like that feeding the information, but I think, like you said, they'll be able to dial it in. I'm sure you'll be able to customize to your preference of how much do you want coming at you. But it's almost like you're watching a football game and you have the crawl at the bottom and you're getting the stats of everybody.
That's a
And
good analogy.
and we you know what, we love that. We love seeing those stats. And we want to know what's who's got how much yards and how many touchdowns and how many sacks. We love it. It could become a fire hose if you're giving too much, of course.
Right.
But like you said, I think we're going to get to the point where the optimal mix will be found, and that's going to become something that what makes you want to use the system more, because we're not all Andy Jassies who have it all up here.
Right. Very few of us are.
Right. We're not going to be the heir apparent to Bezos, right? So some of us really like to have the augmented, stats and recommendations coming at us in real time, because that's when they're going to be the most useful. Tell me something 5 minutes after I'm done, that might not be that great, but if you tell me at that right moment, you give me something that might make that conversion happen, that's what we're all looking for.
Yeah, and I think you may be right, and especially with a younger employee who's used to kind of having a very busy screen. They, and people who love fantasy football are worth looking at, like 5 screens while they watch the football game. And I think that you have people watching TV programs and then engaging with friends and social. You have a lot of this now, so people kind of are used to more divided attention spans. But I still think, it depends on layout, it depends on interface, and UX is going to matter here. And providing the information in a way so that I can just sort of look and say, okay, yeah, and then kind of add, oh yeah, so Brent's a Los Angeles Rams fan. Oh yeah, so Brent, how about that trade? That kind of thing.
How do you feel about Tom Brady, Brent?
Hates Tom Brady. It's in the notes.
Right. Check the notes on that one. All right, this has been great, man. So tell me, what are you looking what are you looking at over the next couple of weeks to months? What are the themes that you're focusing in on?
It's this stuff just sort of comes at me fast, and I have a lot of ideas in my head, and I try to also react to what's going on. So as things happen, I kind of write on based on what's happening, but also like for things like TechCrunch, I'm looking ahead, and like I'm working on a story now for TechCrunch on founders who have started more than one company, to talk to them about what they learned from company to company, because at company A, your first company, you didn't know what you didn't know, right? And so what do you bring to that second company, a third company, those kinds of things. There's a bunch of other things that are in the pipeline, but overall, I'm reacting to the news, I'm reporting the news, and that's how I tend to work.
Well, this has been great catching up, and definitely got to make sure we do this sooner rather than later, because
absolutely,
man, things are not slowing up, man. Things are happening, and these need to be happening faster and faster. So we need to have these conversations. But thanks again, man, for taking time, and for also somehow labeling me a Brady fan. I still don't know how that worked, but anyway,
not a Brady fan, Brady like. All right. Well, thanks for having me.
All right, and thank you guys for checking it out. And I'll be back later tomorrow is going to be a big one for the CRM players. We're going, Ron, you might even like this. We're calling it the CRM players edition of the CRM Wonder Years. We're going all the way back. We've got folks like John Ferrara coming on, who before he was doing Nimble was Goldmine.
Right.
We have Don Peppers, who along with Martha Rogers were the folks who did the whole one-on-one marketing thing and founded Peppers and Rogers Group. And our main buddy Bob Stutz, who currently is the president of CX for SAP, but Bob has been everywhere. He's been with every company.
Adobe, he's been with Microsoft, he's been with SAP,
Salesforce. I mean, so he was there in the early days too. So we're going to be going back. You know, we know what's going on now, but we want to know, how did we get to this point? So we're going to bring in kind of the OGs of CRM to talk about the wonder years. So you got to check that out tomorrow on the CRM Player. So in the meantime,
Definitely.
have a great day, and we will talk to you later.
All right. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.